Hello everyone, and welcome to this special report of exposing James Hind. I'm your host, Matt Taylor. It's coming up to 12 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of February 2020. And today's exposure of James Hind is a subject I would rather not discuss, but I feel it's imperative for the benefit of our children and to protect our society from the infiltration of evil that I address this subject and bring it to your attention. So what we're going to do, without any further ado, is introduce a fictional identity called James Hind to your attention. Now, James Hind has his own blog and he writes prolifically about so-called Satan hunters, as he describes them. Satan hunters are people he believes promote this so-called satanic panic and who harm and abuse children. He puts myself into that category, as he does on the screen at the moment a certain individual called Richard Carvath. I haven't met Richard Carvath and I don't know anything about him. We aren't going to go too in-depth in this article because it raises issues that I simply do not want to discuss in the public domain. But we will just concentrate on the opening sentences to give you, the viewer, an indication of the individual we're dealing with. So this is his latest blog, which was published, I think it was today, but just checking the date. Yes, yesterday it was published. And he writes, a response to recent post by Satan hunter Richard Carvath. Considering he was supposed to be a self-imposed sabbatical from the internet, the Satan hunter from Wall Watton Bassett, known as Richard Carvath, has been busy hammering away at me and a number of his innocent victims. Thus, this is my video response. Who am I? James Hind says. Now, this is very interesting because James Hind doesn't even know who himself is. You can see on the graphics on the screen his quotes that he lives in a permanent trap of dissociation, that he feels as if he lives outside of time and space, that he is actually a quote which I haven't got up on the screen, that he says when he views his life he feels as if he's a participant living outside of his life. So it's a very interesting question, even though on his blog he omits to put the question mark. Who am I? James Hind continues. Protecting innocent victims, especially children, from Satan hunters such as Richard Carvath is my primary mission statement. Now, before I carry on, when he talks about his Batman role, more like his Dick Dastardly role, James Hind has failed to protect any children. He would make a big deal of reporting anyone who names abused children to authorities such as Mould, Crown Court, the Attorney General and the police. But in his own admission, he fails to report paedophiles he identifies online who share illegal content and content of the top level to police. We're going to shine a light on that soon. He says, this is my Batman role, a personal passion and focus. In his blog, which you'll find at satanicviews.press, he talks about how there was 1,000,001 roles he could have devoted his life to, and he chose the protection of children to be the one under his own admission, a great personal cost, great time and resources placed upon it. But yet, he still fails to protect children by failing to report any paedophiles he finds sharing illegal content of the top level. This is my Batman role, James Hind says, a personal passion and focus, which is to say that I have two lives, one fighting Satan hunters and another life where I live an ordinary life. Hence, the false identity of James Hind. Hence, the intel I've received from certain hoaxed-ed whistleblowers that James Hind runs a successful business targeted at Christians. So here we have an individual who acknowledges under the false identity of James Hind of being a member of the Satanic Temple, while at the same time conducting business within a Christian world. Hypocrite springs to mind. Map protector, an evil individual, also follow that. Which is to say, I have two lives, James Hind says. One fighting Satan hunters and another life where I live an ordinary life. In my effort to make the world a better place, fighting Satan hunters is my contribution to the world. And I no longer play champion in any other issue. I keep both lives separate. In my other life, I keep both lives separate. Few in my other life know about my Batman role. And no one in the world of Satan hunters know anything about my other life. The separation of lives keeps me and those close to me safe. It also means that the two lives rarely clash. This means I cannot appear on video, give out my mobile number, or post images of my face other than some that are heavily edited. Personal security is not perfect, but it is strong. That's a very interesting admission there, because he's acknowledging his two lives, his Batman role, as he likes to refer to himself, more like Dick Dastardly, especially with his sidekick, the creepy Smutley, forever blowing hot air up his arse. Now, of course, I've made certain allegations that James Hind protects paedophiles. Or a more watered down version could be MAPS, minor attracted persons. I've actually done a video which I'd like to play for you now. When is Shelley Moat gonna call out James Hind? When is the Dark Angel herself going to call out the insidious map protecting James Hind, who claims to protect children but then protects paedophiles by only suspending them? The map protecting James Hind, who identifies paedophiles on popular online social media sites but refuses to report them to police, who identifies paedophiles who share material of an illegal nature and of the top level, but fails to report them to police. James Hind does nothing to protect children, and now is the time for Shelley Moat to call him out. Now's the time to do the right thing, Shelley, and live up to your reputation. Too many people are calling out the wrong individuals when they should be calling out James Hind. I'd like to take you now to my own latest blog, which you can find at Exposing James Hind. The address is across your screen. I'd just like to bring your attention to James Hind's latest podcasts, where he's more than happy to clarify any misunderstanding of a recent conversation he had with the permanently intoxicated Sharon Gale, in which she got it wrong and came to the false conclusion that he supports Wilfred Wong and Angela Power Disney. In this tweet, he makes it perfectly clear to his satanic audience that he will always be hostile and opposed to Satan hunters Wilfred Wong and Angela Power Disney. Next, James Hind nonsense. Shelley Moat has reported a certain individual, Miss S. Hill, that's Sam Hill. James Hind says himself, Satan hunter Jano Jan Peacock of Crawley in West Sussex has apparently broken a court order in the Wilfred Wong case by contributing in a video where named protected people were named. Thus, I am preparing a report to the police, the Mould Crown Court and Attorney General. So let's just focus on this for a moment. He is admitting that he's going to notify 3 authorities because of someone has contributed. So that means has written a message on a YouTube video where someone so-called protected were named. But yet in his own admission, he doesn't report any paedophiles he finds sharing illegal content of the top level with the police, because it's not in the protocols of Facebook or Google to do so. So because Facebook and Google doesn't specifically say to report paedophiles that he finds sharing illegal content of the top level to the police, James Hind says, I have no responsibility to report them to the police. But here we have a tweet in which he says he's more than happy to report someone who types in a little message on YouTube, as I make out the point. But yet he doesn't report any paedophiles he catches sharing illegal content of the top level to police. He suspends them. That's the same as giving someone a 300-second timeout. James Hind suspends paedophiles he sees sharing illegal content of the top level with other children, and he doesn't report them to police. I want everyone listening to really let those words sink in and realise for yourselves the insidious nature of this individual. So he won't report the paedophiles who are sharing illegal content with children, which he catches as a moderator of an online social media site. But yet he reports anyone who names abused children. Here we have, in his own words, Satan hunter John Wedger has found a new satanic panic promoting dog in Miss S. Hill, who apparently thinks she can take over from Jeanette Archer. Here we have an individual calling women dogs. These women are also victims of child abuse, as Samantha Baldwin is a victim of child abuse in the sense that her children have been abused by her alleged satanic ex-partner, husband and mother to her children. The Dick Dastardly James Hind says Abraham Christie and Samantha Baldwin both used drugs on their child victims to achieve their ends. So he's accusing a mother of drugging her own children. And of course, we cannot mention James Hind without his creepy sidekick Smutley, who Andrew Goyne warns us all that Reese has a very disturbing and odd side to his psyche, and that is so true. Is it nice for anyone to call a victim of child abuse a dog? Of course it isn't. And so the question we have to ask is James Hind a paedophile? He admits, in his own words, that anyone who names abused children is a form of child abuse. But yet he fails to report any paedophiles he finds sharing illegal content. He says in his own words from a November 2018 blog on satanicviews.wordpress.com, as a victim of child abuse, I recognise the harm that false allegation makers do. Not only that they destroy lives of those that they make false allegations against, but also the harm they do to real victims of child abuse. If anyone is harming children is James Hind by failing to report the paedophiles he found sharing images of an illegal nature and top level to police. I cannot stress this enough. So I am a victim of child abuse. I recognise the irreparable damage child abuse inflicts on the lives of its victims because I've seen it in my own life. The child abuse my sister endured has affected the whole family. The nightmare I had to go through protecting my sister from the child abuse still leaves a scar. So in his quote above, he recognises that making false allegations of child abuse not only destroys the lives of the innocent, but also harms real abuse victims because time and resources are spent on investigating false allegations. I mean, having read James Hind's satanic blog myself, I remember him using the £800,000 spent on investigating Cliff Richard as an example. But let's delve deeper into what James Hind has to say on his Satanic Views blog. But before I do so, I must warn you that the information you're about to hear is of a very sensitive nature and does include scenes of child abuse. So I would like to take this opportunity to warn you all, this isn't a subject matter I would particularly choose to cover, but I am doing so because I feel it's imperative to put this information into the public domain. And of course, if it's uncomfortable for me to partake and to deliver this information to you, it may well be upsetting for you to listen to it. So please, if you are of a disposition in which talking of child abuse would either trigger you or upset you, please stop watching this. Because you're about to learn the truth about James Hind and what he does on the internet. There's no other way to spill the beans but to simply come out and say it. So here it is. James Hind pretends to be a 12-year-old boy who talks to paedophiles and children in unmoderated online chat rooms. Over to James Hind to explain himself further, and I do have to give a warning out, everyone. The descriptions of child abuse may cause traumatic triggering of childhood abuse memories. So an extract from his Satanic Views WordPress.com from November 2018. He says, "For personal and business reasons, I want to learn more about the paedophiles, their process of grooming in chat rooms, the impact they have on their victims, what the police and paedophile hunters are doing, and what the children feel, experience, think and act with regards to these paedophiles. I need this insight to be able to speak about this and to create some AI to counter the grooming process. I have never been on a chat room before, but for a few weeks I have been watching and interacting on a number of chat rooms. It's very educational, especially learning about how I am reacting and feeling about things." Now, isn't that a very interesting extract and an insight into the psyche of this man? He wants to learn more about the paedophiles. Why would anyone want to learn more about paedophiles? But his answer is because he wants to learn about the process of grooming in chat rooms, the impact they have on their victims, what the police and paedophile hunters are doing, and what the children feel, experience, think and act towards with regards to these paedophiles. Of course, he wants to make an AI bot to counter the grooming process. If anything will counter the grooming process, it would be notifying the police of the details of the paedophiles that you've identified on these unmoderated social media sites, which you failed to do. So I find the very fact that his reasons for jumping in both feet with this paedophilia mindset, because he wants to know everything about them. He wants to know how the grooming process, he wants to know how paedophiles are caught, paedophile hunters, how they do their job. So he may say He needs this insight to speak about and how to make an AI bot to counteract the grooming process. But also, this sounds like a paedophile who wants to submerge himself in the world of paedophilia, so he knows exactly how the police work against paedophiles. He wants to know exactly how paedophile hunters work against paedophiles. For personal and business reasons, I want to learn more about the paedophiles, their process of grooming in chat rooms, the impact they have on their victims, what the police and paedophile hunters are doing, and what the children feel, experience, think, and act with regards to these paedophiles. Why am I the only one who's shocked here? As you should be. Why would any man, for either personal or business reasons, would they want to learn more about paedophiles and everything about paedophilia? From how not to get caught by understanding how the police and paedophile hunters lure paedophiles to the children themselves. So here he is an example. He wants to interact with children and talk about their feelings of being abused. I don't know about you, but I find this really difficult subject matter to address, which is hence my warnings. He wants to know in depth what the abuse felt like and how they feel towards their abusers. Is it just me, or is it shocking? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Why? Why has James Hind said this? All the while reporting Jeanette Archer, Angela Power Disney, Sam Baldwin, Owen Lucas, and others to the police, for child abuse, or rather his perverse twisting of what child abuse is, to achieve his own satanic goals by manipulating the police. That's exactly what these Satanists are doing. And James Hind isn't the only one who's manipulated the police to achieve their own insidious ends. It makes you wonder whether Satanists have infiltrated our nation's police forces. In the one opening paragraph, we learn in its entirety that James Hind publicly declaring his intention to learn more about paedophiles, in his own words, for his own personal and business reasons. Damn! If I had said that in my blog, I would be crucified as a nonce. James Hind says it, and he's lauded as a satanic hero. So what personal reasons would anyone other than paedophiles have with learning everything about paedophilia? What so-called business reasons would anyone have other than to earn money from paedophilia? Interested in the paedophile's process of grooming in chat rooms, he also wants to learn about the impact child abuse has on their victims. When he thought he would have known himself, having declared himself a victim of child abuse. He wants to know what the police and paedophile hunters are doing, and of course he would. The number one rule of being a Satanist is not to get caught being a Satanist. Hence why we learn he keeps his Batman life, more like Dick Dastardly life, away from his personal business life. Because I know from whistleblowers from the Hoaxted research community that James Hind is a CEO of a company in which all his clients are Christians. No wonder he wants to keep his Batman, Dick Dastardly identity secret from his real personal life. Of course, James Hind wants to learn everything about being a paedophile, seeing as he's on a mission to embrace paedophilia. He wants to know what the children feel, experience, act, and think with regards to these paedophiles. Why the fuck would anyone other than a paedophile want to know that? Over to James Hind. Again, this is an extract from his Satanic Views WordPress, November 18, 2018, which I hasten to add he has removed. He says, in his own words, there is a number of things that the experts have not picked up upon or are very wrong. In one chat room, I'm aware of a pattern never reported before, that certain types of girl in the 12 to 15 age group will actively challenge paedophiles, but seem to end up in a close emotional interaction with a few. Maybe he has actually been in a few emotional interactions with 12 to 15-year-old children. You can pretty much be assured that he has. He continues that too many teens are not checking who they are friending when it is obvious it is a paedophile. That boys, and rumoured some girls, have adopted the process of paedophiles to predate on fellow children. That the harassment of children and women in chat rooms is very intense, especially by predatory males, with probably 10 attempts on a female for every 1 attempt on a boy. That the paedophile hunters and police are insulting if they think that most teenagers write like them in chats with retarded text speech. With retarded text speech. So here he is lambasting police authorities. He's making his own investigations, but he's not passing these on to the police authorities, but yet he's lambasting them. That the paedophile hunters and police are insulting if they think that most teens write like them in chats with retarded text speak. The younger teens write very well, and groomers don't spend weeks or months grooming on the internet. Most move towards the subject of sex very quickly. The experts with an AI who think that when someone discloses something personal, it's a red flag that they are a paedophile, clearly have no clue, since I have seen lots of situations of people disclosing things for attention seeking, and teens are quite open in what they share. I need to jump on and provide a narrative as to what I've just read. James Hind is talking about young teenagers and the subject of sex. In his own quote, he says certain types of girl in the 12 to 15 group will actively challenge paedophiles, but seem to end in a close emotional interaction with them. Which means, in plain English, am I wrong, that James Hind is having or has had an emotional interactions, plural, with teenage girls and boys aged between 12 and 15 years old. He mocks the police, who are evidently doing their job on behalf of society by moderating these unmoderated chat rooms and favourite hangouts of paedophiles to which James Hind is pretending to be a 12-year-old boy. He says the younger teens write very well. Younger teens are children. Younger teens, we're talking about pre-12 years old. We're talking about 7 to 12-year-olds. I shall repeat this for the sake of Shelley, May, Poodles, Pebbles and joking. I said this is a little joke referring to very vocal supporters of James Hind, namely Shelley Moat, Nadia Marshall and his sidekick, James Hind's sidekick, the creepy Smutley, Reese Leverick. James Hind has admitted to visiting online paedophile hangouts, pretending to be a 12-year-old boy. Groomers most move towards the subject of sex very quickly. So James Hind is talking sex with teenagers as young as 11 and 12. He says, I have seen lots of situations of people disclosing things for attention seeking, and teens are quite open in what they share. So that's, again, an admission that he is sharing with young children and teenagers. He is discussing sex with them because he understands how quickly the subject of sex can be approached. He says in his own words, again from the extract of satanicviews.wordpress.com from November 2018, he says, for the purposes of the paedophiles, I play an insight role as a young teen male. My avatar is really me, and my story is roughly as it was at that age. I am as authentic as possible, and I keep away from the subject of sex. But this becomes harder when a groomer moves in on me. I am ambivalent about what I am seeing of teens. They appear streetwise. They do talk about sex in main chat. They are open, impulsive, play dangerous roles, such as play being a paedophile, asking for nudes in order to expose one. They are cruel, for instance. In one case, suggestion a moderator got their role by sleeping with the admin. I take people as is when I interact with them. So if they say they are 13, I treat them as such in all the interactions. If a person says they are self-harming, taking drugs or feeling suicidal, I will say to them not to do that and seek help. I will warn noobs being new people to the site, to be careful, and I will intervene if I think someone is looking at risk. There is only so much I can do and say within my role. But yet, within his role as a private citizen, he's more than happy to report anyone who names abused children, but doesn't in his role as an online moderator for a very popular site frequented by children, teenagers and paedophiles, which in his own admission is being monitored by the police. He doesn't report them. He suspends them. As you appreciate, this is a developing story, and I've only today come across this very damaging evidence that James Hind is a paedophile hiding in plain sight. I'm reading that out of context. It's been months now since I first put this up, late 2001. I'm only making this clear following James Hind's contacting the police to report Sharon Gale for child abuse, having named Child X from the Wong case. But yet, under his own admission, James Hind, during his time as a 12-year-old boy, talking sex and exchanging filth with other teens, Hind identified a groomer from Kent. And while he could have ruined his life by reporting him to police, he chose not to because, quote, "It is not in my nature to be the cause of the ruin of the lives of others, unlike the hunters. I don't like that on my mind." I'll translate that for you, for anyone who doesn't completely understand what he's just said. He's more than happy to report Sharon Gale for low-level child abuse, he describes it, for naming a child X, for naming abused children. But yet, he would not report a paedophile he finds, a groomer he finds sharing illegal material of a top content, because it's not in his nature to be the cause of the ruin of the lives of people who destroy the lives of children. I don't like that on my mind, he says. I could have ruined him. I could have done my job. I could have reported a paedophile to the police, but that means I would have ruined his life. And it's not in my nature to be the cause of the ruin of others who abuse children. I don't like that on my mind, he says. Which begs the question, why was James Hind pretending to be a 12-year-old boy in a notorious paedophile-infested teen/children chat room if he wasn't there to identify the real groomers and report them to police? Am I making my point clear? If he's not there to report the police, if he's not there to report to police the paedophile he's identifies as sharing illegal content of the top level, what is he there for? Because he clearly will not report any paedophiles. He will not ruin the life of a paedophile, because it's not in his nature to be the cause of the ruin of these people's lives. He doesn't like that on his mind, but he's more than happy to label me as a paedophile. He's more than happy to report people who name abused children. Why is he there if it isn't to report paedophiles? That's a question for Shelley Moat, Nadia Marshall and Creepy Smutley. We now have a case of James Hind reporting multiple people to police, claiming a form of child abuse for naming child X, all the while identifying real paedophile groomers in chat rooms, doing real harm to children, and choosing to ignore these actions because he wouldn't like the thought of a fellow paedophile being caught for what he himself is doing. This is his quote: "The groomer from Kent I could have ended in their life being ruined, but it is not in my nature to be the cause of the ruin of the lives of others, unlike the hunters. I don't like that on my mind." So I say, with conviction, that James Hind is a paedophile hiding in plain sight. Again, an extract from his satanicviews.wordpress.com, November 2018. There is at least a dozen police from all over the world on that site at any time, and they should know what is going on, and they do nothing. I just want to interject there now. They should know what's going on. You know what's going on, James Hind, but you do nothing. You don't report the paedophiles that you catch. Thousands of children use that site every week. Can you just let this sink in, people? And they see all this, and they are all being approached by the paedophiles. If people want to see the site I have been talking about, they can message me on Twitter. I will give you the address. You can join the chat room as a guest without an email and see what I mean. So he's inviting other people onto the social media site, which he knows thousands of children visit a week, unprotected by anyone, because James Hind certainly doesn't protect them, does he? Forgive me for getting passionate. Forgive me for having to pass this information out to you. But I'm doing so as an obligation to our children, to identify these people and make it plainly clear to you that they cannot be trusted, and they should be approached with extreme danger. These people are dangerous to our children. He has admitted that thousands of children frequent this online social media site, and he's admitted that he does nothing to protect them because he doesn't report them to the police. But yet he lambasts police. There is at least a dozen police from all over the world on that site at any one time, and they should know what is going on, and they do nothing. Do you know why they don't know what's going on? Because you don't tell them. And here again, he's inviting people to contact him on Twitter, and he'll give out this social media site. The media, public and parents really don't have a clue just how bad this can be on chat rooms, especially those with moderation problems. Yes, because James Hind is failing to report the paedophiles he was tasked to identify and report. James Hind is actively inviting members of the Hoaxhead research community to contact him so he can pass on the web address of a notorious paedophile children teen hangout. Again, an extract. Of the paedophiles, on a regular basis, I was asked straight off if I had sisters, their ages, nothing about me. I would ask why, and they ignored my question, demanded answers. Although I said I had sisters, which I do, I refused to give any further information. In my interactions, I am nice, polite and approachable, probably too trusting and open to conversation. Yesterday, a random person offered me £500 to go on to Snapchat or Omegle and do what they said. I asked what they wanted, and they were not sure, but wanted me in my underwear. Then they wanted me to send pictures or video of my penis. I refused. I think I am being blah, blah, blah. So we are going to elaborate on this story, because what we also done was analysing James Hind's response. Now, I don't know I don't know how you feel about that, but I found it very harrowing having to talk about. And if this internet works, we'll be now able to go through an analysation of James Hind's response. And we're going to do more on that because he's actually left a message today. So we're going to come up right up to date with this. But before we do so, I want to share with this to you. He says, addressing the false allegations of Satan hunter Matt Taylor. Recently, says James Hind, I had to write a post in answer to the Satan hunter Matt Taylor from Brighton, UK, who tried to get at me by repeating the false allegations of one Nathaniel Harris. Not done with trying to ruin the name and life of an innocent man, that was not me with fictional allegations. Matt Taylor has now produced a comment I made to Hoaxted a couple of years ago on the subject of my work, fighting paedophiles. Now, before we carry on, when he says this fictional, he said, not done with trying to ruin the name and life of an innocent man, that was not me with fictional allegations. Who he's talking about is an individual called Julian Vane, which many people claim is James Hind's real name, Julian Vane. For me personally, I'm reluctant to, to confirm my belief that James Hind is Julian Vane, only because of doubts raised to me by my Hoaxted whistleblower. And so while many people allege that James Hind is Julian Vane in real life, I don't sign up with that conclusion. I would need more information. From where I stand, I don't know who James Hind is. But more importantly, neither does he. So back to what he says. First, I do not identify as a Satan hunter. Sorry, this is me speaking now. Hind seems happy to label everyone as a Satan hunter, and it's getting old, stale and boring. My relationship with Santa is my business, and our relationship is between him and I. I am certainly not a Satan hunter, and I personally pity the man as low EQ and a permanent heightened sense of doom that his cover will be blown and he'll be exposed for what he really is. And that's something is worth just reiterating. I don't mean any harm towards James Hind, okay? He publicly stated that he'll keep a close eye on me, and that scared me. I don't like being monitored by a member of the Satanic Temple. Someone who's said he's going to keep a close eye on me. That caused me distress, alarm and fear. So which is why James Hind was brought into my sphere of attention. I actually pity him because on his own admission today on his blog, he's petrified of the real him being identified for obvious reasons. He's made a living of servicing Catholics. He's got a reputation as a God-fearing individual. So I do pity him living under that constant stress of his Batman role, as he says, hiccup, more like Dick Dastardly role, being exposed to the world. So here I like to call him Satan Hater Hunter as a jibe against him. For the record, I love Santa and treat him as my father. I've now changed that. I see him as a Satan lover. I do pity him because he does live in a permanent heightened sense of doom that his cover will be blown and he'll be exposed for what he really is, which is, as we can see from this, a map protector and Satanist. I'm not trying to get James Hind by repeating anything Nathaniel Harris has said. I'm merely responding to the constant stalking and harassment I've received from James Hind and his crew, for a better word, his satanic cult members. Big shout out to his sidekick, the creepy Smutley. I remember it started with renewed vigour in August 2020 when Hind wrote a message in a YouTube chat room aimed towards me, which I perceived as a vow of revenge. He said, "I have not forgotten about Matt Taylor either, for your contribution to the hate on innocent people of so-and-so. James Hind has no right to call me a predator and a danger to women and children. He has no right to call me a menace to society and deserving of being locked up in prison. James Hind has no right to publicly state that he's going to keep an eye on me, to spread false rumours that I have 3 convictions, stalking convictions, and that there are currently 3 complaints against me. James Hind has no right to interfere in my life. But now as he has done so, he has invited himself to the scrutiny and the accountability that he vowed to bring against me." Now this picture is of Julian Vane, and as I've just described and done a disclaimer on this, many people do believe James Hind is Julian Vane, but I don't sign up to that conclusion. I just want to make that clear. So, James Hind tweets, "Almost most of the UK Satan hunters have become less active in the last month. I will be increasing the pace in challenging them over the coming weeks." This is a quote from James Hind, not necessarily Julian Vane. I would need more to see more evidence to make that conclusion. He says of me, "Matt Taylor seems unable to stop harassing and stalking people. He is a massive attention seeker with no empathy for the suffering he causes people. One day, there may be ways to control the activities of people like Matt Taylor on the internet. Matt Taylor is a Neanderthal in love with his own mirror image. His IQ amounts to the ability to count to potato. I will keep a close eye on Matt Taylor, as I will keep a close eye on James Hind. I am purely making public what Nathaniel Harris has said to me via comments left on my Exposing the Hoaxed Trolls blog, which the address is appearing across the screen. If someone left a message on either Hoaxed Research or Satanic Views blogs that I am somehow connected to the Batley satanic sex cult, then of course either Karen Irvin or James Hind would bring that attention and information to the attention of a wider audience. I'm simply doing the same. So here we have an individual called Nathaniel Harris, a legend. James Hind is involved with the Kid Welly South Wales satanic sex cult. Here is a picture of an individual called Colin Batley. Colin Batley was a satanic cult leader sentenced to years in jail after being found guilty of sexual offences against children. Again, I'd just like to, for a disclaimer, this is an allegation being made against James Hind by a certain individual called Nathaniel Harris. I shall move on swiftly. Taking into consideration that James Hind confesses to be a member of the Satanic Temple and pretends to be a 12-year-old boy in notorious paedophile pre-teen online chat rooms, it isn't surprising that more questions would be asked. And isn't it hilarious that Shelley Moat, is the first to come to his defence? Here's a quote. "Not only with trying to ruin the name and life of an innocent man that was not me with fictional allegations, Matt Taylor has now produced a comment I made to Hoaxted a couple of years ago on the subject of my work fighting paedophiles." Well, let me just interject there. James Hind does not fight paedophiles. He protects paedophiles. In my personal private opinion, as an ex-Royal Military policeman, trained in taking witness statements, looking for inaccuracies in speech and writing skills, and general detection of deception, I haven't been convinced that James Hind is not Julian Vane. They are one of the same person. But, again, that's just my personal opinion. And the disclaimer is, I haven't seen any definitive proof that James Hind is Julian Vane. And I have been warned by my Hoaxted research whistleblower that they aren't one of the same person. So, for me personally, he has failed to convince me he isn't Julian Vane. But until more compelling evidence can be produced, my opinion will remain the same. Though I am open, I would be pleased to be proved wrong. James is factually correct to say I reproduced a comment he made to Hoaxted a couple of years ago on the subject of fighting paedophiles. And here is the quote. As a victim of child abuse, I recognise the harm that false allegation makers do. Not only that they destroy the lives of those that make false allegations against, they also the harm they do to real victims of child abuse. But he's factually incorrect to say he's fighting paedophiles. He didn't fight any paedophiles, but in fact pretended to be one. He pretended to be a 12-year-old boy, but failed to report another paedophile he identified from Kent to the police, while he boasts about reporting Sharon Gale, Jeanette Archer, Angela Power Disney, Sam Baldwin and Owen Lucas to the police, and he's now reported other people since then. So hell yes, I reproduced a comment he made on Hoaxed Research in 2018, and damn lucky I did too. Otherwise, none of you would be the wiser that this pathetic piece of scum, protected by the likes of Shelley May, Nadia Marshall, Creepy Smutley, and Christopher Brindle. He pretended to be a 12-year-old boy in a notorious paedophile-infested children teen online chat room, claiming to fight paedophiles when in fact he protected them by failing to report them. In his own words, the groomer from Kent, I could have ended in their life being ruined, but I did not. But it is not in my nature to be the cause of the ruin of the lives of others, unlike the hunters. I don't like that on my mind, he says. It is just very, very worrying. To start with, Taylor unkindly drew attention to a comment I made that I had been sexually abused as a child. This is interesting and worth looking into. No, I did not in any way, shape or form intend to be unkind towards James Hind by reproducing his public confession that he was a victim of child abuse. As a victim of child abuse, I recognise the harm that false allegation makers do. Not only that they destroy the lives of those that they make false allegations against, but also the harm they do to real victims of child abuse. I make the point again that I am a victim of child abuse too, and would never do anything to be unkind to another victim. I reproduced the quote to highlight Hind's hypocrisy, that he acknowledges false allegations destroy lives, but yet repeats false allegations about myself and creates new and varied allegations on a weekly basis, such as I'm the owner behind numerous YouTube channels. This is what he said, by the way. This is his quote. This sex abuse was at the lower end of scale of sexual abuse that I suffered at the age of 6, along with my younger brother. So here we have an admission that James Hind was sexually abused as a 6-year-old child. He said, this sex abuse was at the lower end of scale of sexual abuse that I suffered at the age of 6 along with my younger brother. That's his quote, by the way. So while James Hind's sexual abuse was at the lower end of the sexual abuse scale, the physical, emotional and sexual abuse I received growing up was near the middle to higher end of the scale. And I've written extensively about my history of child sex abuse, and you can follow that in the link provided. So this is over to James Hind now. This is him talking about his sexual abuse that he suffered as a 6-year-old child along with his younger brother, which he described as at the lower end of scale of sexual abuse. He says, the events of a certain events, I'm loath to mention in public, but the events of let's just move on. The events of, it's censored at the moment, had over time triggered me. And in 2018, I reported the sex abuse to police. Via the NHS, I had PTSD group sessions in 2019 and individual therapy sessions in 2020/21. So here we have saying a very major case of sexual abuse at the far extreme of sexual abuse triggers someone who claims he only had low-level sexual abuse as a child, and that he had to have PTSD group sessions in 2019 and individual group sessions in 2020 to 2021. So, let's just get this straight in our heads, shall we? Hind wants us to believe that as a victim of sexual abuse, at the lower end of the sexual abuse scale, a 2014 case, which I cannot name for legal reasons, triggered a response in him over a 4-year period, which culminated in him reporting his childhood sexual abuse to the police in 2018. I pray I've got that accurate, and hope my reader, who knows better, would correct me if any facts are wrong. So, symptoms of PTSD. Symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder include flashbacks, nightmares, feeling very anxious and difficulty sleeping. Someone with PTSD often relives the traumatic event through nightmares and flashbacks and may experience feelings of isolation, irritability and guilt. They may also have problems sleeping, such as insomnia, and find concentrating sorry, I'm trying to concentrate with an incoming phone call and find concentrating difficult. These symptoms are often severe and persistent enough to have a significant impact on the person's day-to-day life. Now, I don't know how old James Hind is, but I estimate him to be in his early 40s. He wants us to believe that during childhood he suffered child abuse along with his brother. That, I hasten to add, was at the lower end of the scale of sexual abuse, but which 35 plus years later was triggered by the testimonies of 2 individuals, which resulted in 4 years later a NHS referral to PTSD group sessions in 2019 and individual therapy sessions in 2020/21. I don't know about you, but I'm not buying it. The sex abuse left me with PTSD and disassociation. Sexual abuse left me with scars I will carry for years. It's left my sister a heroin addict and a street sleeper drinker. Both my nieces are now both drug addicts. One is in a mental institution for stabbing a man after hearing voices in her head. My mother died because she couldn't get enough of her medicine, which society deems illegal, to stay alive and relieve her medical symptoms. The point I want to make here in that sentence, in that paragraph, is that I understand more than anyone the consequences of child sexual abuse. I understand better, I've said this itself, how childhood sexual abuse ruins lives, because it has ruined my life, the lives of my mother, sister, nieces and friends. I suffer from PTSD and dissociation, having been continuously harassed and arrested by Sussex police since 2015. I've lost count of how many times I've been arrested and how many hours I've languished in a police cell. I've lost count, but I recount it there. This is all about me here now, so I won't waste your time. Back to James Hind. Okay, I've got to say it. I've been left with PTSD, having been arrested. Oh, let that go on there. I cannot even begin to tell you how PTSD has affected my life, but I will put it down into words in due course. But luckily, James Hind does a better job than me by putting into words exactly how I feel after a panic attack when I hear a vehicle pass my house or a car door open. The dissociation is lifelong and is a natural reaction by the body in extreme trauma situations where the body prepares for death by shutting down pain and emotion. Dissociation is my default response to stress, which makes me think that James Hind was lying when he said he suffered low-scale sexual abuse as a 6-year-old along with his brother. He clearly didn't suffer low-level sexual abuse by 35 years later, having such extreme reactions and having to refer himself to the NHS for group therapies and individual therapy sessions. I totally get it and sympathise with anyone suffering from PTSD, be it from fighting in war, suffering child sexual abuse, or being mercilessly gang-stalked by a satanic sex cult aided and abetted by the police. James Hind says, in 2021, when making another complaint to the police about Jeanette Archer, I accidentally triggered another child abuse investigation when I mentioned in the complaint that I had been sexually abused by a family member and was triggered by a video that Archer had posted showing the physical abuse of a child. I do not want to proceed with the second child abuse investigation. He says, in the aftermath of my complaint to the police over sexual abuse, I was haunted by questions. Why was I abused? What did I do wrong? Why did the person abuse me? Now this is very interesting because this differs from the reasons why he told us originally why he chose to devote his life to fighting child abuse. He wants us to believe that between 35 and 40 years after the low-scale sexual abuse he suffered, age 6, he was triggered by the testimony of 2 individuals that went on to leave him haunted with questions. According to the timescale given, James first reported child abuse to the police in 2018 and again in 2021 after group and individual therapy sessions, where you thought these questions would have been answered. Why was I abused? What did I do wrong? Why did the person abuse me? To supplement group and individual therapy sessions, he felt it prudent and necessary to go above and beyond and pretend to be a 12-year-old boy in a notorious paedophile children teen online chat room. As a victim of child abuse myself, I wouldn't need either group or individual therapy to answer these questions. Why was I abused? I was abused because I was the easy option and the weakest link. What did I do wrong? I did nothing wrong. I was the victim. It wasn't my fault I was abused. The fault lies 100% with the abuser and not with the abused. Why did the person abuse me? They abused me because it turned them on and it turned and satisfied their own sexual gratification. Their own sexual gratification and satisfaction meant more to them than ownership of my own body, virginity, dignity, freedom and choice. I can answer those questions easily and I don't need to pretend to be a 12-year-old decoy boy. I don't need group sessions and I didn't need individual sessions. James Hind says, these questions resulted in a period of intense research into scientific studies on paedophiles, media interviews with paedophiles, paedophile stings, crime reports, anything that would answer these questions. Now we have Hind elaborating, or rather embellishing his story. So let's recap, and we won't be going on for much longer. 1. Abused age 6 alongside his younger brother, described as low level on the scale of sexual abuse. 2. Was triggered in 2014 by the testimony of 2 individuals. 3. Submitted report to police about his own child abuse in 2018. 4. 2018 or sooner, went undercover as a 12-year-old boy in a notorious paedophile preteen teen online chat room. 5. Group therapy sessions in 2019 and individual therapy sessions in 2020 and 21. 6. 2021. Started a period of intense research into scientific studies on paedophiles, media interviews with paedophiles, paedophile stings, crime reports. 7. 2021. Was triggered when reports in Jeanette Archer to police that he was physically abused by a family member, but chose not to pursue the complaint with the police. Anything that would answer these questions, he says. During this period, an opportunity came up where I could serve on the moderator admin team of a social media site. Now, interesting that he used the words opportunity and serve. Opportunity means that he's been looking forward to becoming the site's moderator, and serve because it implies he's doing something worthwhile for the greater good, that he's contributing to a worthy cause to which he is happy to sacrifice his time and attention without expecting any monetary reward. If he wasn't getting monetary reward, he would have been getting some kind of reward to keep him coming back for more. So he says, in his own words, armed with the tools of a moderator that included the ability to delete content and suspend people, I dealt with users and content that included spammers, racists, hackers, flamers, whatever flamers are, trolls and paedophiles. Wow! Isn't this revealing too? He mentions a social media site, which to me means Facebook. I agree it could also mean Instagram, Twitter and YouTube, but Facebook is the most likely social media platform who allow moderator and admin teams. Whenever social media platform he had the opportunity, a very interesting choice of word, because it means he was looking forward to become a moderator on there. He was looking forward to deleting content and suspending people on. He admits that were paedophiles. It takes one to know one, or as Hind himself describes it against me, horses running together. Hind would be better placed than anyone to know a paedophile, seeing as he's been hanging out with them online, pretending to be a 12-year-old boy since 2018, and no doubt long before. Part of my role, he says, was to identify and remove paedophiles from the site, which was where a team of 2 moderators worked together, one as a child, the other to deal with any paedophile that was discovered and communicated to them by the child. Now, was he doing this to fight the paedophiles, which he evidently didn't do when he failed to report the pedo groomer from Kent in 2018, or was he doing it to answer the 3 questions, which in all honesty should have been answered in 2019 during his group therapy sessions? He says that part of his role was to identify and remove paedophiles from the site, but yet he admits later to only suspending them, which begs the question, what type of social media site are we talking about? By the way, James Hind talks about having to identify and remove paedophiles from the site. To me, implies it's a children-friendly social media site. In his own admission, he says it's a site in which thousands of children visited a week. Why else would there be a role to identify and remove paedophiles from a social media site other than for the reason that children visit and use the social media site? I think we've all accessed or all accepted that the social media site in which he was a moderator on was frequented by young children and teens. I mean, really, is anyone buying this bullshit? There's more to it, which I will address. We'll have to come back to this. But like I said, as a father myself, I find it difficult saying this information. But we will finish it off with the latest now. This is the latest, everyone. This is an individual called Tiger Janice has recently done a video in which she's promoting James Hind site. And I make the point, this post and your support of the fictional entity known as James Hind proves to me you are all part of the same crew. Map protecting James Hind reports numerous people for naming abused children, while failing to report paedophiles he catches sharing illegal content of the top level amongst children to the police. When will Shelley Moat and the Mouse call Map Protector James Hind out? Never, because they are all part of the same crew. In his own words, he doesn't report paedophiles to police because he doesn't want to ruin their lives, and he couldn't live with himself with that on his mind. In his own admission, he only suspends any paedophiles he catches sharing illegal content of the top level to children. You yourself, and I'm talking specifically to Tiger Janice, again, an unknown identity hiding behind a sock puppet account. You yourself have uploaded a video of my child and distributed it on your channel. Did you get my permission to do so? No, you never. Because you believe the same rules apply to us don't apply to you. Now take my son's video down, you map protecting creep. So James Hind has responded. This is what he has to say. MAP, minor attracted person, MAP stands for, is a word that paedophiles use to minimise their child abuse, abusive urges and activities against children. They think that if they can create a politically correct word like MAP, as Matt Taylor does, that society will treat paedophiles and what they do in a positive light. MAP means minor attracted persons. I would ask Matt Taylor not to support paedophile positions by using that word. They are paedophiles. That's really revealing what he has to say there. So he's putting me in the group of paedophiles by claiming I use the word MAP. I use the word MAP because I hate the word paedophiles. I'm fed up of hearing that fucking word. And I am politically correct. And I think MAP does describe who we're talking about. James Hind is protecting MAPs. People, minor attracted people. He is protecting them. And so no, James Hind, I will not stop using the term MAP. So I'm doing so to be politically correct. And I know if I start banning the word paedophile around in my titles on my YouTube, those YouTube channels will get taken off. So this is very revealing. In response to my allegations against my true allegations, warranted and valid allegations against James Hind, that he protects paedophiles, his first comeback to me is ask me to change the word MAPs to paedophiles. It's ridiculous. In a previous role, I was a moderator on a social media site, and it was not my role to report predators to the police, just as it is not a task for YouTube or Facebook moderators. But again, it's not his role to report numerous people for naming child abuse victims, but he's taken it on himself to do so. Can you see the insidiousness of this man is making me quite ill at the moment? We would suspend users, log their rule breaking and remove content. Log their rule breaking. So that means he'll save it for his own collection and then remove it. Others higher up with access to logs dealt with contacting police and preparation of evidence suitable for arrest and prosecution. Oh, now he's making out that he's passed his information on so that more managers within Facebook and Google will report to police. Matt Taylor should learn about moderators before he opens his mouth and makes an idiot of himself. I warn Matt Taylor again not to put images of his children on the internet. He is using them as human shield against his critics. In my opinion, Matt Taylor is abusing his children. Fucking hell. I'm going to have to stop this because I'm so fuming. Here he is, an individual I've never known, warning me not to put pictures of my children up on my internet. He accuses me of using them as human shields against his critics. In his opinion, Matt Taylor is abusing his children. Okay. This is for you to decide, the audience watching this. James Hind continues, excuse the pun on the name of the military prison that the disgraced soldier Matt Taylor was sent to, but if he's going to throw stones in glass houses, he should get his own house in order. He exposes his own children to abuse. He has been supporting child abusers such as Abraham Christie, Nathaniel Harris, Angela Power Disney, Samantha Baldwin, etc. all. He has been investigated for indecent images of children. He has a court order against him protecting certain children. He was arrested for concerning activities of boys in the woods. Red flags all round for Matt Taylor in the areas of child protection. Projection, Mr. Taylor? So that's his response. He's not going to address any of the crimes he's committed, the crimes of failing to report paedophiles, the crime of subjecting thousands of children to ongoing exploitation by groomers and paedophiles. He chooses to throw it all back at me and bring up false allegations made against me. So that's it. This is going to be part one. Like I said, we've got lots to go through. In his own words, James Hind feels as if he lives in the permanent trap of disassociation. His fight with the Satan hunters is a feeling of injustice, he says. We'll be adding on to that. We'll be looking more at James Hind's own blog. We'll be looking more at his Twitter account. We'll be looking more at his YouTube supporters, his crew. We'll be looking more at my blogs. We'll be looking more at James Hind. So, until the next time, thank you for watching. I know it's been a difficult subject matter. I would rather not have to deal with this, but sadly, we must. We must for the sake of our children. So you've been listening to Matt Taylor. I've been your host, broadcasting live from Brighton. Please check out the blogs that you can see going across your screen at the moment. Please leave a comment. Please be aware of this individual hiding in plain sight. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.